Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Nichiren is in exile on Sado, but he's making friends quickly and converts. And there are people living on Sado. It's an inhospitable place, certainly in the winter. And Nichiren's been given a pretty dilapidated shack to live in. But he's getting support from the landowners there and some important people. A lot of secular people are liking what Nichiren has to say about practicing Buddhism. It's not just this mystical, magical, or politically connected method of practice. It's more true to the mind, the individual, the self-determination of an individual. But this is in a very authoritarian, dictatorial state, yeah? With the threat of death or having your lands confiscated, or the government is very oppressive. So on the one hand, you might go along to get along, and you don't want to hear anything from Nichiren. Certainly those who would be monks or practicing or within the, should I say, social structure or corporate structure, so to speak, of the religious entity throughout Japan, Nichiren poses a threat, not just as a way of practicing Buddhism or a thought, but allegiances, right, to their masters. But the farmers, the merchants, the tradespeople, the, regular folk outside of the religious institutions or government institutions. But I shouldn't say that, because the samurai are very much within the government institution, right? They are the mighty arm of government reaching out into all sectors of the country. But they're less driven by the ontology or the belief systems that are inculcated in the elite, and they're very attracted to Nichiren. Well, I mean, I imagine to be an effective samurai, you would have to have a great deal of loyalty, but also a very independent spirit. To wake up every morning in the Bushido code, like your actions today may be the end of your life, whether you see yourself as doing that for your master, or yes, there's that, but I as an individual am existing and having to deal with life and death every day, right? There's a very independent streak in a samurai. The samurai chooses to be loyal, in other words, doesn't just blindly follow. Well, certainly not all of them. I mean, you can make general statements, but they don't apply necessarily to everyone. Anyway, point made. Nichiren has a great deal of influence on those who would have an independent mind, yeah? So, having said that, I want to remind you how much I appreciate your being here and your practice. We've had a recent bump in subscriptions, so thank you for doing that. If you're new here, welcome. There's lots and lots of information on this channel. A lot of free information also available to download on threefoldlotus.com. You see the links in the video, you know how it works. The subscriptions and the likes on the videos are so essential to use this medium of YouTube to reach more people, so we show up in the searches. So thank you for doing that. We are in the midst of Nichiren's Sado exile, and he's asking some pertinent questions of himself and Buddhism in its entirety, especially as relates to the dissonance that he sees between what he's studied his whole life and what Shakyamuni so clearly is saying, and the political, egotistical machinations of the institutions of his day that seem to have just thrown out these truths in favor of manipulating those very same teachings into some kind of strange religious practice, right? With the mudras and the mantras and Amida Buddha, and when you die you'll go to a nice place. What? I mean, throughout all of Shakyamuni's teachings, the whole reason he was teaching was because his goal was to live this life fully for everyone. That should be universal. Everyone should be able to live their life to the greatest of their potential. What's so hard about that? Oh, no. We have to lead people by the nose and make them afraid, and because it's easier to control people who have weird magical thoughts and fears of all sorts of things. It's the history of man, yeah? But Nichiren, as we know, not having it. And in Sado, he's starting to research his own presence in Japan as a meaningful expression of what Shakyamuni discussed in the sutras, especially in the Lotus Sutra, that in this modern era, if the teachings of his teachings, the teachings of self-enlightenment, were not to be completely lost and bowled over by all this other magical, mystical claptrap, there would have to be at least one person who would rise up out of the midst of humanity to claim, hey, let's read these teachings for what they really are. Let's understand them clearly, and let's understand that Buddhism is all about getting a hold of our own minds and living our life to its maximal potential. That the Buddha land is this land here and now, not some other magical place. Well, a lot of people didn't want to hear that. So that's why Nichiren ends up on Sado. But he's still investigating his own role in all of this. Am I just a loud young man who was doing this for myself personally, and I am, but can I do this in such a way that speaks to what Shakyamuni was expecting, is that not only would I make noise and say, you remember I used to use the analogy of the emperor's new clothes. Remember that Western fable about the emperor is basically walking through town naked because the tailors and all the people who are afraid, creating this mystical idea that they've made such excellent clothing but it's all vaporware, it's a lie, but they're all comfortable living that lie. And so are the townspeople. So they parade the emperor through the town naked, and the emperor's all full of himself. Yeah, look at these new clothes. They're so opulent. All the while saying to himself, I'm naked, but I'll never admit that. Yes, I too see the opulence. And the whole town is like going along with it. Yeah, you're so amazing. You're so beautiful. Except one kid doesn't know enough to be intimidated by the guard and the entourage and all the people around him. And he looks and he goes, I can't deny what I see, right? The emperor's naked. And, don't say that. No, but screw you. The emperor's freaking naked. Somebody tell the poor guy. And that's when the emperor realizes, oh, crap. I'm naked, right? Well, so Nichiren very much feels like that kid in the crowd. He doesn't know about this fable, but you understand. But now he's asking himself while he's on Sado, not only do I see the situation clearly, and am I calling it out, and the people who like the illusions don't like me calling it out, but maybe that means that it's not just for myself that I need to be truthful, right? He learned from the last expulsion when he came back, he was much more sensitive to those who would listen to him, his students, disciples, whatever you want to call them. Understanding that it wasn't just that he saw clearly, but that he needed to help these others dispel the same illusions and give them confidence, share his confidence, so that they could develop their own. Yeah, Emperor's naked. Thank you. Thank you. You're not just agreeing with me, you're seeing the truth. Well, there's an aspect of responsibility to that maybe I hadn't fully understood before. So he goes back to studying. Maybe there's a clue in these truths that Shakyamuni was talking about to help me understand how I can be a more effective and maybe take on the mantle of leadership to help others to achieve this same obvious clarity. So this is where he's at on Sado, right? And it fortifies him, but it also expands his understanding of his role in Japan and within Buddhism. So we take up the story with the question for Nichiren, and this is the author speaking now, was therefore, is there anyone in the present age of degeneration, the threat of the loss of the teachings, who practices the true essence of the Buddhist practice? Is there anyone else? Is it just me? In order to answer this question, Nichiren proceeds anew to re-examine the stanzas of the chapter on perseverance. Again, as I said, he goes back to the Lotus Sutra, looking for support, answers, insights. The three kinds of opponents, the malicious laymen, the perverse monks, and the jealous hypocrites, have been actually embodied in Nichiren's persecutors, right? He's had these members, if you will, of these elite religious institutions who consider him to be quite a threat, attack him. He's had malicious laymen. Those are just regular folks who are scared shitless that their lives are at stake. If this guy stirs the pot a little too much, shut up, right? Like the crowd that says to the kid, don't say he's naked. We all know it, but don't say it aloud. And the kid's like, pfft, right? So those are the lay people. And the hypocrites, well, those we've already talked about, the perverse monks. And, jealous hypocrites. People who know he's right. But why should you be the one? Right? We're just biding our time. So the persecutions heaped upon him are letter by letter prophesied in the text of the Lotus Sutra. They're foretold. I don't really like the word prophecy because it has all this charisma about, it's kind of magical, right? But this writer, we know, is affected culturally by Western rhetoric. It's not really appropriate in here, so we try to look past it, right? The perils which the bodhisattvas, consecrating themselves, promised Shakyamuni, this is told in the Lotus Sutra, or the Buddha, not the Shakyamuni the man, but Buddha-ness, more accurately, to endure abuse and derision, weapons and sticks, banishment and execution. These have all been experienced in Nichiren's life. It's like he's living the words of the Lotus Sutra. So that bolsters him all the more. But if the Lotus Sutra is identifying him in his persistent embodiment, and really those words are not only now taken personally by Nichiren, but he wants to understand the context. If I see myself placed in this teaching, thousands of years old as it is, how does it play out? What should I be doing or predicting will happen next? It seems to be kind of a map here, yeah? Is there then any room to doubt that Nichiren is the true Buddhist, the man who is realizing the foretold, the prophecies about the propagator of the truth in the latter days? And obviously, Nichiren is identifying himself with this very task. If Buddha is really all-knowing, if Buddha-ness is clearly understanding the process of life, and he says this is going to happen, we can't see him as a liar, like the kid in the crown who says the emperor's naked. Well, the kid isn't a liar, he's just expressing truth. So, in other words, no reason to doubt. If the saints out of the earth, the bodhisattvas from under the earth, right, in the Lotus Sutra, you and I, future bodhisattvas, which now is the future, are not liars and hypocrites, and their vows not vain, then Nichiren is surely the man who is fulfilling the vows of the old bodhisattvas. Buddha is the primeval master, in other words, Buddha-ness accompanies life, and Nichiren is now living the life of his primeval or foretold disciples. He's inculcating the responsibility, as described in the Lotus Sutra, of Buddha-ness at large, and the personal responsibility we in samsara need to take for that obvious practice. Bodhisattvas. Primeval, in other words, throughout time, therefore everlasting, as long as time exists, and as true for the future as in the past, he is the one predestined to be the leader, the emancipator of the coming ages. In short, Nichiren is the man who is, quote, reading, end quote, the truth with his life. So you see the transition here from somebody who's thoroughly convinced the emperor's naked, he knows the truth, he knows how to self-actuate Buddha-ness. But now it's not just he who realizes it, but his task as the realizer of it is to lead others to see the same. In short, Nichiren is now understanding the true commitment of a bodhisattva. The same thing you and I are doing. We may begin this practice simply to secure our life, whatever brings you to it. You're tired of repeating the old habits. You're looking for something new to feel inspired by. You're looking for just a reason to go on. Certainly it's not this work-a-day job or this relationship or this blah, blah, blah. There's got to be more to life, right? These are the questions that bring you to Buddhism. And Buddhism says, yes, you are more than you think you are. You are much more an integral part of the fabric of what is life. And there, you're going to hear noises because we're having some bad weather here, and I can hear the rain falling on the roof. So Don't think there's something wrong with your sound, right? I sound like an old Outer Limits tape, but anyway, some of you will get that. It's an old TV reference. Life. I was thinking about this yesterday. We use the word life almost without. We don't really think about what we're saying. We have two ways of thinking about life, and we don't. It's funny how we shift between the two, kind of beneath the radar of our consciousness. When we talk about your life, my life, we think in terms of a lifetime, a human lifetime, or any other. We measure other lifetimes, other beingness by the scale of a human life. But really, we should have a different word for it. And the reason I say this is because we need to remind ourselves every time that word skips through our mind, life, that what we're talking about is the entirety of the universe. I know I don't want to sound silly or magical here. In point of fact, and I read and I watch a lot of programs on science, on cosmology, on astronomy, on physics. Those are things that interest me outside of Buddhism. But I'm constantly fascinated at how the human mind is seeking more and more answers from tinier and tinier evidence of the process that instantiated everything in the universe. And it's very clear to me, the more I study early on, the name of this school, that they're very similar pursuits that Shakyamuni answered 3,000 years ago, but that science is still wrestling with. This idea that every single thing in the universe is all the same. It's just energy formations. That an electron here, or on Pluto, or in the farthest reaches of the universe are exactly the same. We don't have 20 million types of electrons. They're all the same. Right? Think about that. When we say life, we need to think that. Life, as I often have said, the universe is the engine of life. It doesn't create life. It is the engine, the process of life itself. And you and I are experiencing that entirety in a very small, compact volume. And our sentient mind is the one tool, the one facet, the one function that we have. That's the kid in the crowd going, witnessing it, observing it, truly, without politic or influence, or look at clearly. And this is when we read in these translations the word pure. That's what we're talking about. Understanding that you and I and this computer and this building and the rain, there's so little that separates us. The universe is naked. And when we chant, we open that clarity in our minds. We don't summon a special being or move to a different place. It's all happening right here, right now. We just conduct ourselves unaware. Right? So in a very real way, practicing Buddhism correctly is, what's the word I was just going to say? Old age is not fun. Anyway, we're trying to understand life clearly. So life, again, back to what I was saying, isn't just personal, but it is personally experienced. So we need to understand that weird duality of life is we tend to compartmentalize it into just our own ego, self experience. But we're a very tiny part of a very big thing we call life. So Nichiren is grappling with this right now. By such considerations, Nichiren justified himself in his polemic attitude. In other words, now I feel like it's, me being the kid in the crowd saying the emperor's naked is not only valid, but it's valid that I should make noise about it. Now the question is, as I'm making noise about it, how am I influencing those that would understand what I'm talking about and take this mission on for themselves? There's some responsibility there. There's compassion there. There's like, how can I do this effectively on the one hand, and how can I inculcate some protection and some clarity and some inspiration for others that would join me in this task? The precedence he gives to the, quote, repressive, end quote, method in propagation over the persuasive, quote unquote, was the necessity of the time. In other words, we're in an age now where we can't just sit around and wait for things to happen. Shoju and shakabuku is what he's referencing here. Is that there are times when you need to say, no, stop, look, emperor, you see his butt? You need to be very almost obstinate about the truth. And there are other times when, look, you know the emperor's naked, right? Okay, so let's talk about what's going on here. Shoju, right? So this is what he's talking about here. It was the way ordained by Buddha, because the malicious men of the latter days could be converted only by arousing their utmost malice. In other words, you can't be afraid of somebody saying, oh, you bozo, that would talk down to you, that would try to minimize you. You can't tolerate that. So then that means that it's incumbent upon us to find a way, as I've discussed before, to reestablish dignity. You can't just fight stupidity with stupidity. You can't just get violent. That's not what shakabuku means, right? You need to, in the face of those challenges, what's the rhetoric we would use in the West? Rise above it. But more than rise above it, find a way to still be an example, even to those who would assail you. Your goal should be to walk away from them and leave them wanting to know, what is it that that person knows or has that I'm missing? Make them doubt. Right? Because in truth, they're cowards and they're afraid. Bullies. That's the history of bullies. Underneath that is a scared little person. And so to create value out of that, you need to not succumb, number one, and you need to leave them wanting to know more, to understand that you've got something that isn't assailable by their brute force, by their bullying, has no merit, no effect on you. How do we do that? And thereby exterminating their radical sins, in other words, converting them. Let men's eyes be opened to the existence and work of Buddha-ness, the truth in Buddhahood, and to the duties of the true Buddhist. And their sight will be clear enough to see in Nichiren the predestined manifestation of the primeval Bodhisattva, the messenger of the Tathagata, expressing this thought with firm confidence. Nichiren says, and this is a translation of a quote, "Finally, let the celestial beings withdraw their protection. Let all the perils come upon me. Even so, will I dedicate my life to this cause." There's that resolve again, yeah? "Be it in weal, be it in woe, to desert the lotus of truth means to fall into the hells. I will not be swayed, yeah? I will be firm in my great vow," because now it's not just me. This is a commitment I'm making that's asked of me by this practice. "Let me face all manner of threats and temptations. Should one say to me, quote, 'You might ascend to the throne of Japan,' if you would abandon the teaching, the lotus of truth, expect future bliss through belief in the meditation on Amita Buddha. Just join up. Just be part of the Nembutsu. And you could run this country. You're so impressive." What a manipulation, huh? That's the world of anger, by the way. "Or your parents shall suffer capital punishment. If you don't toe the line, we'll kill your folks. Unless you utter the name of Amita Buddha," etc. "Such temptations I shall meet unshaken and shall never be allured by them, unless my principles be shattered by a sage's refutation of them." It would take a considerable intellectual understanding beyond what I have learned in my life to crush the clarity I feel about Shakyamuni's teachings and the practice, the true practice of self-enlightenment. Somebody would have to be really intellectually superior to me to convince me of that. "Any other perils shall be the dust before the storm. I will be the pillar of Japan. I will be the eyes of Japan. I will be the great vessel of Japan." Now understand, this isn't an egotistical boast. This is a humble taking of responsibility for this mission being greater than he alone, Nichiren the man. He's now speaking for his entire nation. Now you can see in medieval Japan and throughout history, and this expresses itself all over the world, as you would well know, this saber-rattling, it sounds like this national identity crisis, yeah? But Nichiren is seeing it as personal, right? Not so much to say that Japan is better than any other place. See, he's not saying that. What he's saying is, Japan, my beloved home country, the place where I exist with all of these fauna, flora, people around me, surely if Japan is to be a place of living life fully, then that responsibility I take wholeheartedly. Not in comparison to China or any other place. Do you see what I'm saying? It's fixing home first. But that can be taken by a lot of militaristic thinkers, and it has been, as a nationalistic call for Japan in the context of other countries. You know, people who just like war. But that's not what Nichiren is saying here. Inviolable shall remain these oaths. So he's recommitting to the Lotus Sutra, as he did when he first started. But now he's including his context, his entourage, his history, his people. Not to distinguish them from the rest of the world, but to distinguish them from the misery they're in. To live fully. If that becomes an example to then push out into the world in a very Buddhist way of thinking, then that's great. But you got to start here, right? So our author goes on a little further here. When Nichiren had finished the opening of the eyes, amidst the snows of winter, with the coming of the spring, a better time began for him. The governor of the island was much attracted by his bodhisattva life, as well as his strong personality. This guy, he means what he says. He's not just repeating stuff. He's a man of character. So he was very much recognized by folks, country folks, who weren't so impressed with the elite and the government back in Kamakura, right? The government issued an order to protect the exile, the government of Sado. Nichiren was given an abode at Ichinosawa, a place on the slope of a range of hills. So he got to leave his stupid little shack where he was freezing to death. All because of the leadership and the townspeople that he was impressing. The local chief of this region admired and protected him, showing him great respect. His wife and son were converted. The place of exile became a veritable center of propagation, really. And many flocked to listen to the sermons of this wonderful man. I mean, if Kamakura heard of this, they must have just been itching with anger, yeah? This man they sent out to die in a shack, suddenly he's turning everybody into converts and supported and given a nice home, and damn it, it must have really upset them. Nichiren reviewed his past experience anew in calm reflection. Look at where I've been. Look at what's happened to me since I've committed to this practice again. The hardships he'd gone through appeared in another light. They were just part of the gauntlet of life, yeah? And he now recognized that they were all in expiation of the grave errors he'd accumulated from eternity through neglect or abandonment of duty. Ignorance. I can see how this is altering, changing, influencing my life toward enlightenment by casting away those deeply ingrained karmic elements, those energies that in the past have led me astray, or that I've made causes in this life, created karma that created my own obstacles. No need to lament any of that. Just recognize how far I've walked away from it. Expiation, right? Changing karma. Or not having always lived as a true Buddhist, just out of ignorance. The strenuous repression of which he had made so much in his combative propagation meant the repression not only of others' illusions and vices. He wasn't just battling all those hypocrites and malicious laymen, as we said earlier, but of his own doubts, fears that he grew up with, familially, culturally. A representation, as you and I are, of the entire process of time and space. Oh, not just me as a 12-year-old before I went into the monk stream of study. Yeah? See, there's life, there it is again, as an entire thing, the universe. And then there's our tiny little life dipping its toe into it. But if you dip your toe into it, you can't escape the energies and the momentum of the whole thing. So this is a different kind of relationship, kind of disassembling the self a little bit, or seeing the self as not a unique, hermetic little unit, but a concentration, if you will, of photons of light, of energy, within a great, unimaginable mist of photons. Interesting. In a letter written about 1 month after he'd written The Opening of the Eyes, he sums up the arguments expounded in that work and speaks of himself as follows. Do we have time to read this whole thing? No. You know what? I'm going to save that till the next video. Yeah. There's a lot to talk about in that. I hope you're enjoying, appreciating, getting something of an insight here into the life of Nichiren. I think it's most interesting because it traces so much our own experience of, first of all, curiosity about life, and secondly, somehow finding Buddhism as more than just a word you hear, but as an interesting practice. And thirdly, as we commit to our practice, all these little dominoes start to fall. And sometimes they seem so obvious. Man, thank goodness I found this practice. And other times we miss a whole bunch until something major happens, and then we think, or if we quit and regress, we're totally aware of, man, I forgot how long it's been since this has been happening to me. That's those old tapes again. Oh, crap. I need to start practicing again. And then we realize how valuable this practice is. We all go through it, either a little bit or a lot. But we can see in Nichiren these vicissitudes of our human tendencies, especially in this day and age of greed, anger, and foolishness. Oh boy, are we aware of that, yeah? So once again, congratulations, truly, for your practice. Appreciate this wonderful practice in your life. Take care of your health, right? Be kind to yourself. It's the nature of life to have exploding supernovae as well as bucolic green hills and innocent fauna and flora and beauty. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Again, welcome to those of you who are just now starting your journey. And I'll see you in the next one. All right? Bye for now. Myoho